Sara Gilbert was never the loudest person in the room, but she became one of the quiet forces behind some of television's biggest moments. Millions of people remember her as Darlene Conner, the intelligent, sarcastic, rebellious daughter from Roseanne, but the woman behind that character lived a life far more complicated than most viewers ever knew. She grew up surrounded by Hollywood, entered show business as a child, became a television star as a teenager, attended Yale University while still filming a hit sitcom, built a successful daytime talk show, helped revive one of television's most famous sitcoms, and later helped transform that same franchise into the Conners. Yet behind the achievements was a person who spent years trying to understand herself while carrying enormous expectations, private fears, relationship struggles, and the pressure of constantly being the person who made everything work. Her story is not simply a story about fame or success. It is about identity, resilience, family, reinvention, and the hidden emotional cost of growing up in the public eye. Sarah Rebecca Beals was born on January 29, 1975, in Santa Monica, California, into a family with deep connections to entertainment. Her maternal grandfather was Harry Crane, a writer and co-creator of The Honeymooners, one of the most influential sitcoms in television history. Her mother, Barbara, worked as a Hollywood producer and talent manager, meaning the entertainment business was already part of Sarah's world before she was old enough to understand what it meant. But Sara was not simply born into a Hollywood family. She also grew up watching her older sister, Melissa Gilbert, become a major television star. Melissa was famous for playing Laura Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie, and Sarah's brother Jonathan Gilbert also appeared on the series. For a young girl watching her sister become famous, the entertainment industry was not some distant fantasy. It was happening right in front of her. When Sara was around 6 years old, she watched Melissa receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That moment reportedly inspired her to tell her mother that she wanted to become an actress too. It is easy to look back at that moment and see the beginning of a successful career, but there was another side to it. From childhood, Sara was surrounded by extraordinary expectations. Her sister had already achieved something enormous, and Sara was entering an industry where comparison was almost unavoidable. She began working as a child, appearing in commercials and television projects, and in 1984 she began using the surname Gilbert professionally, connecting herself to a family name that already carried recognition in Hollywood. She was only 9 years old. Then came the role that changed everything. At 13, Sara auditioned for a new ABC sitcom called Roseanne. She was cast as Darlene Conner, the sarcastic, intelligent, creative middle child of a working-class Illinois family. The series premiered in 1988 and quickly became one of the biggest shows on American television. While Roseanne Barr was the undeniable center of the series, Sara's Darlene became one of its most memorable characters. Darlene was rebellious, witty, artistic, uncomfortable with authority, and often seemed to be searching for a place where she belonged. For viewers, she was simply a brilliantly written teenage character. But Sara's connection to Darlene was deeper than many people realized. She was growing up on television at almost exactly the same time that she was trying to understand herself in private. During her teenage years, Sara realized that she was gay, but she was not ready to discuss that publicly. This was the late 1980s and early 1990s, a period when openly gay actors in mainstream television faced far greater uncertainty and discrimination than they do today. Sara was also a young actress whose career was already tied to one of the most popular television shows in America. She therefore had to navigate a difficult internal conflict. She was becoming famous while simultaneously trying to understand a deeply personal part of her identity that she feared could affect her career. The irony was powerful. America watched her play a character who was outspoken, independent, and unafraid to challenge expectations, while Sara herself was keeping one of the most important parts of her life private. Her personal life became even more complicated when she began dating her Roseanne co-star Johnny Galecki, who played David Healy, Darlene's boyfriend on the show. Their relationship was real, not simply something created for television. Sara has spoken about having a genuine crush on Galecki, and the two were together for a period of time. But Sara experienced intense sadness and depression during the relationship, and Galecki initially believed that he might somehow be responsible. Eventually, Sara understood that the problem was not Galecki himself. She realized that she was gay. She explained this to him, and according to the story Sara later shared publicly, Galecki responded with compassion and support. He kept her confidence for years. When Sara eventually decided to tell the story publicly, she reportedly contacted Galecki beforehand to make sure he was comfortable with her discussing their relationship. His support became one of the most meaningful parts of that chapter of her life. What makes the story even more remarkable is what Sara was doing professionally and academically at the same time. While most teenagers on hit television shows were dealing with school, friends, and ordinary teenage concerns, Sara was also balancing the demands of a major network sitcom with an elite university education. She attended Yale University and graduated in 1997 with honors, earning a degree in art with a concentration in photography. The production of Roseanne was reportedly adjusted to accommodate her education. Filming schedules were changed, and arrangements were made so that she could continue appearing on the series while attending school. It was an extraordinary commitment. She was simultaneously a television star and a serious student at one of America's most prestigious universities. When Roseanne ended its original run in 1997, Sara entered a very different phase of her life. For a while, it seemed as though the world did not quite know what to do with her. She continued acting, appearing in movies such as Poison Ivy, Riding in Cars with Boys, High Fidelity, and Light It Up. She also took television roles in series including ER, 24, and Will and Grace. Later, she returned to familiar territory when she appeared on The Big Bang Theory as Leslie Winkle, a scientist and romantic interest for Leonard Hofstadter, played by her old friend Johnny Galecki. But none of these roles immediately became another Darlene. Sara had become famous very young, and now she was experiencing something many former child stars know well: the challenge of building an adult identity after becoming associated with one defining role. The years after Roseanne were therefore less about chasing another huge acting role and more about quietly building a life away from the spotlight. Sara entered a long-term relationship with television producer Allison Adler. Together they had 2 children, a son named Levi Hank and a daughter named Sawyer Jane. Sara was still not publicly open about her sexuality, and much of her family life remained private. She and Adler eventually separated, and Sara later became more open about her personal life. In 2010, Sara publicly came out as gay. That same year, another major chapter began. She became one of the creators and hosts of The Talk, a daytime television program built around women discussing family, relationships, current events, motherhood, and personal experiences. The idea reportedly grew from Sara's experiences attending mothers' groups after becoming a parent. She noticed how honest and complicated those conversations could be and believed television could capture that same energy. The Talk premiered on October 18, 2010, with Sara Gilbert joining Julie Chen, Sharon Osbourne, Aisha Tyler, and Cheryl Underwood among the original hosts. The program became a major part of daytime television, and Sara was not simply another person sitting at the table. She was a creator and executive producer who helped shape the show's identity. For someone who had spent years keeping parts of herself hidden, The Talk offered something different: a platform where she could participate in conversations on her own terms. She could discuss motherhood, relationships, work, and difficult personal experiences while also helping control the direction of the program. In 2013, she publicly discussed the story of her relationship with Johnny Galecki and the realization that she was gay. The moment was deeply personal because it connected her teenage years, her private struggle, and her adult life in a way she had rarely done before. Galecki was supportive, and the conversation became an important part of Sara's public story. But even after coming out, Sara acknowledged that discussing her sexuality could still make her nervous because she worried about the effect it might have on her career. That fear is important because it shows how different public success and personal security can be. Sara had already achieved enormous professional success, yet she still carried concerns that many people might assume should have disappeared by then. Her life seemed successful from the outside, but success did not automatically erase insecurity. Her personal life continued to evolve. After her relationship with Allison Adler ended, Sara began dating singer-songwriter Linda Perry, best known as the former frontwoman of Four Non-Blondes. Perry proposed to Sara in 2013, reportedly using a series of t-shirts that spelled out the question. The couple married in 2014, and in 2015 Sara gave birth to their son, Rhodes Emilio Gilbert Perry. Together they created a blended family that included Sara's older children. They also collaborated professionally, including on the children's album Dear Sounds. For a period, the relationship appeared to represent another chapter of stability for Sara. But her life would soon enter one of its most difficult periods. In 2018, Roseanne returned to television. Sara Gilbert was one of the key people involved in bringing the revival together and served as an executive producer. The revival was an enormous ratings success. The first episode attracted a huge audience, making the show one of the biggest television events of the season. After years away, the Conner family was suddenly back at the center of American television. Sara had helped make it happen. Then everything collapsed. On May 29, 2018, Roseanne Barr posted a racist comment about Valerie Jarrett, a former senior advisor to President Barack Obama. The backlash was immediate and enormous. ABC canceled Roseanne, despite its ratings success. Sara publicly condemned Barr's comments and supported the network's decision. The situation became deeply personal. Barr later criticized Sara and accused her of contributing to the destruction of the show. For Sara, this was particularly painful because Roseanne had been the series that launched her career when she was 13 years old. It was where she had spent much of her adolescence, where she had formed lifelong relationships, and where she had created the character audiences still associated with her decades later. Yet instead of walking away from the wreckage, Sara helped create a solution. She proposed continuing the story without Roseanne Barr. The result was the Conners. The Roseanne character was killed off in the series through an accidental opioid overdose, and the remaining members of the Conner family continued their story. Sara became both a lead actress and an executive producer on the new series. It was an extraordinary act of professional reinvention. A show that had seemingly been destroyed was rebuilt into a new series, and the Conners ultimately ran for 7 seasons, concluding in 2025. The transformation was not easy, and it could never completely erase the controversy surrounding the original revival, but Sara had managed to turn one of the most chaotic moments in television into another long-running chapter of her career. At almost the same time, however, her personal life was becoming increasingly difficult. Sara left the talk in 2019 after nearly 9 years with the program. She said she wanted to focus on other opportunities and her family, but the timing was significant. Her marriage to Linda Perry was also breaking down. Sara filed for legal separation in December 2019, citing irreconcilable differences, and the divorce process eventually took several years before being finalized. During roughly the same period, she was also dealing with the enormous professional pressure surrounding the Conners and the continuing fallout from the collapse of Roseanne. In other words, within a relatively short period, Sara was experiencing major changes in several areas of her life at once. She had left a show she had helped create and build. Her marriage was ending. The television franchise that had defined her childhood had gone through an extraordinary public scandal. And she was helping carry a new series forward under intense scrutiny. Yet she continued to work. She continued to raise her children. She continued to build her career. She continued showing up. That may be the most revealing part of Sara Gilbert's story. Her life has often been defined by rebuilding. As a child, she entered an entertainment industry shaped by her family's legacy. As a teenager, she became famous while privately trying to understand her sexuality. As a young adult, she pursued a Yale education while maintaining a demanding acting career. After Roseanne, she had to establish herself beyond the character that made her famous. She then created The Talk, turned herself into a producer and television executive, publicly came out, built a family, married Linda Perry, became a mother again, and later helped transform the remains of Roseanne into the Conners. Her career demonstrates remarkable resilience, but there is another question beneath all of those achievements. What did it cost her? It is tempting to describe Sara Gilbert as someone who simply overcame every obstacle. but that can make the story too neat. She spent years hiding a fundamental part of herself because she feared what honesty might cost. She experienced the complicated transition from child star to adult professional. She watched a beloved television franchise collapse in spectacular fashion. She lost a marriage. She left a show she had helped build. She had to navigate co-parenting and professional responsibilities while continuing to work in an industry that constantly demands reinvention. Through all of it, she rarely presented herself as someone seeking sympathy. Instead, she continued moving forward. That quiet determination may be why her story is so easy to overlook. Sara Gilbert has never been the celebrity who constantly appears in headlines or turns every personal crisis into publicity. She does not have the kind of public persona built around scandal. Her strength has often been much quieter. She works behind the scenes. She produces. She writes. She develops shows. She acts. She raises her children. She rebuilds when something collapses. And because she does these things without constantly demanding attention, audiences may underestimate just how much she has accomplished. By the time The Conners concluded in 2025, Sara had spent decades in television. She had gone from a 6-year-old girl inspired by her sister's Hollywood Walk of Fame star to a teenager playing one of television's most recognizable characters, then to a Yale graduate, producer, talk show creator, wife, mother, executive producer, and the person who helped rescue a major television franchise after an extraordinary scandal. Her career has lasted for almost 4 decades. She has received Emmy recognition and a Daytime Emmy Award, and she has built a substantial body of work both in front of and behind the camera. Her financial success has also been widely reported, although exact celebrity net worth estimates should always be treated cautiously because they are rarely verified public financial statements. What matters more than a number is what her career represents. Sara Gilbert did not simply remain famous. She repeatedly reinvented herself. She moved from acting to producing, from child star to executive, from sitcom performer to talk show creator, and from supporting actress to one of the central figures responsible for keeping the Conner family story alive. Her life also illustrates how complicated the idea of success can be. From the outside, someone might look at her career and see almost nothing but achievement. But achievement does not erase the years of uncertainty that came before it. It does not erase the fear she felt about coming out. It does not erase the pain of relationships ending. It does not erase the pressure of being a child actor or the emotional burden of having to rebuild a television legacy that had become part of her identity. Sara Gilbert's story is therefore not really a tragedy in the traditional Hollywood sense. It is more complicated than that. It is a story about someone who experienced difficult chapters but refused to allow those chapters to define the ending. The young girl who once watched her sister receive a Hollywood star eventually created her own path. The teenager who was afraid that revealing her identity could damage her career eventually became an openly gay television creator and executive. The actress whose biggest role seemed to be behind her eventually became a producer with the power to shape television herself. And when Roseanne collapsed, she did not simply watch the ruins. She helped build something new from them. Perhaps that is the real lesson in Sara Gilbert's story. The most important part of her journey was never the fame itself. It was the ability to keep changing when the life she had built no longer worked. She kept learning who she was. She kept protecting the people she loved. She kept working when things became uncomfortable. She kept rebuilding after disappointment. And she did it without turning her private struggles into a permanent public spectacle. Today, Sara Gilbert's legacy is much bigger than Darlene Conner. She is an actress, producer, creator, mother, and one of the people who helped shape several important chapters of modern American television. Her journey reminds us that the people who appear the strongest from the outside can still carry enormous private pressure, and that a successful life is not necessarily a life without heartbreak. Sometimes resilience is simply the decision to keep moving forward after the version of your life you expected has disappeared. Sara Gilbert has spent decades doing exactly that. Behind the sarcastic smile of Darlene, behind the cameras of The Talk, behind the chaos of Roseanne, and behind the success of The Conners was a woman who spent years trying to understand herself, protect the people she loved, and find a version of happiness that actually belonged to her. And perhaps that is what makes her story so compelling. She did not become successful because life was easy. She became successful because, every time life changed, she found another way to continue. Her story is not simply about what happened to Sara Gilbert. It is about how she kept becoming Sara Gilbert, one difficult chapter at a time. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this untold Hollywood story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories about the lives, struggles, and transformations behind the celebrities we think we already know.